Welcome to the assembly guide for Hoggle. Right, in your pack you will find obviously the main head and torso and arms of the miniature, and you will also get a bag of parts which includes the spray that obviously Hoggle uses to spray the fairies, and also the hand decoration that goes on his belt. So first of all, we need to sort out any mold lines that are on the model, and there aren't many. The major one is hidden away along the bottom of the model, just along here. So if you aren't confident in being able to sand that down, scrape it down, then it won't be seen once the model is sat on a plinth anyway. So that's absolutely fine. However, you can just gently scrape it down with a sharp scalpel and it'll disappear very quick, or just a quick rub down with some sandpaper, some high grit sandpaper such as an 800 grit. Check out our resin assembly guide featuring Ludo for more details on how to prepare resin and washing it and filling any gaps. When you do wash this, be aware of the eyebrows and some of the tassels and bits of string and rope and things, because they can be quite fragile. The whole thing's pretty solid, but you don't want to hit those too hard with when you're washing it. So there's some very fine points on the end of the eyebrows to truly capture Hoggle himself. Right, assembling it. So you've got the spray and his hands as one part, which fit on here. Now, when you first put them on, if you're not familiar with how resin models and models in general go together, you might find that there's a slight gap. Now that is from how this piece is cast. So there'll be, you will see, let's see if we can get the camera to focus a second. There we go. This piece up here, you can see, looks like it's broken because it's slightly lighter. Now that's where the resin gate or frame was on it for casting, which means and ensures there's no air bubbles within the piece itself. So that's clipped off before it's delivered, but they can get in the way, the excess pieces, and they can stop the hands sitting nicely. So we'll just scrape that down gently, and then we'll do another test fit and see how we get on. There's also a slight mold line around the hand here, very, very slight. So just quickly scrape that down, or give it a quick sand, whichever is your preference. Now we've just cleaned that up and shaved that down slightly, we can give it another test fit and see how it goes in. Right, there is something at the top there which is stopping this hand from seating correctly. This one's not bad at all, so that's fine. It just requires a little bit more pressure just to push it in. If you want to adjust how things are, whether they're straight or not straight, or if they don't fit quite how you want them to, you can heat them up with water or a hairdryer. It's advisable if you're a beginner to use a hairdryer, because obviously you don't want to be dealing with boiling hot water. However, boiling water is the fastest way of doing it, but try it with a hairdryer first. Heat up the part along here, then press it in to get a good fit. So I think this is just going to need a bit of glue and a bit of pressure, and that will fit really nicely. If you do use the hot water method, Get some gloves that withstand the heat so you don't burn yourself, or hold the piece with some tweezers and dip into boiling hot water that's just come straight out of a kettle into a cup, and submerge it very briefly. You only want a couple of seconds, and then straight onto there, and that'll be very, very soft, and you'll be able to manipulate it into position. So let's get this glued in. So we want a little bit of super glue just around the joint of the hands, around the cuffs, and it sits in the handle of the spray sits in where those sort of bags are. So you just want a little drop in there, so you've got sort of 3 points of contact, which will make this a nice strong connection. We just hold that in, just press it down. It's a strong piece, so if you're pressing on the hands, you can be quite firm with it. It's absolutely fine. Just make sure you're not pressing down on any of the slightly more fragile parts of the model. So, but gripping by the arms on the back and then underneath, and then press down on the hands, and that will be fine. Just hold that there for a little bit. Make sure we've got a good contact. And there we go. That is Hoggle and his spray together. Now the next piece is the canister for the spray. Now this comes with the gate still attached, so you will have to cut this off. So we can use some sharp clippers, such as these, with a flat edge there and nice flat points there, so you can get into certain areas and clip things out. You can get ones which are more curved. They are less useful because you can't get into sharp corners and things with them. With these, you don't want to go right up to this right up to the close bit of the tank, because you could end up, when you compress, it'll stretch and pull, and it could pull material away from off the actual tank itself. So what you want to do is just start off, just gently clip off the surrounding parts and just work your way down. So you're not trying to clip it all off in one go. You're not putting too much strain on the model, and you're not putting too much strain on the clippers. Get it down to about something like that. So then we can now take our scalpel. Now please ignore what I'm doing. This is years of practice being able to do this, controlling the blade. You will want to, for beginners, place it down on a flat surface with the little bump facing up, so you've got a nice secure connection there, and just gently start cutting it off. If you use a rolling action like you would when you're chopping any kind of material with a knife, and just take it off in small chunks. Don't try and do the whole thing at once, because you could end up breaking something or hurting yourself. And do that until you've got all of this completely off. Once you've got it to about there, so you've still got a little bit raised, you can then scrape it down and sand it smooth. So we can scrape all of that off, and keep rolling them part backwards and forwards if you are scraping, because if you keep it in one spot and scrape, you'll end up with a flat section where you've scraped it off. So keep rolling it backwards and forwards so you keep that curve. And then a little bit of sandpaper over there just to smooth it all out. Will be perfect. And now we've got that part all cleaned up. There is a little indent on the top near that cap there. And the indent is where it sits on the actual spray. So it'll sit on the end like that. If you're familiar with pinning, you may want to pin that. If you're unfamiliar with pinning, gluing will do it. As long as you're careful with it, just gluing that on will be okay. But I recommend that if you can pin, do so, because it will create a much stronger bond. So what we'll do is we'll just put a tiny bit of super glue on there. Make sure you don't get it stuck to your gloves. And then we'll just sit that right there. Just make sure it's sat correctly. There we go. Perfect. Okay, the last piece of the puzzle is the little hand decoration that hangs off his belt. Now that comes with a piece of chain or a piece of cord cast onto it, so don't cut that off, because that will help you in attaching it, and that sits just in there. So there's a tiny bit of rope and a tiny little hole, a little indent where it should go, right in there. If you cut that piece off, you won't be able to glue it on properly. So that sits in like that, and will just hang down. So what we need to do is we need to add some glue in there, add some in the hole, and then a little bit on the inside of that bag. So then the side of the decoration is also supported. You have, however, got to be very careful that you don't glue your gloves to it. So you can get super glues with slightly longer, finer tips, so that might be worthwhile. Just dab a bit on and just use the tip to drag the super glue down onto the bag. Hold it very gently by the fingers. And slide it into position. We'll just hold that there. That should set very quickly. There we go. That is Hoggle complete.